ladies and gentlemen, I've done a few marathons, and the 35-kilometer moment, it's a true wall. So I hope you're not hitting that wall at the moment. But before I go into my actual speech, I would like to thank Philip and the team for inviting me here and shortly explain my thoughts. And also thank the European Commission and Big Dirk and his team for the great work so far. I want to emphasize the fact that these different sectors that we are talking about in Europe, which are all important, they are different. And when you think about the industry in Europe, the industrial sectors are also different. And I would dare to claim that the bioeconomy is quite a strange animal in that sense, and that has an impact on what kind of financing you need for your projects to be successful. So with this graph, this is a simplification of the situation, but on the left side, you have the research and development phase. This can be a university or research organization or a starting company who is doing the work. The Horizon 2020 is the leading research and development program in the world. So we cannot say that financing is an issue for this phase in Europe. And if you're an SME, I would say that the instruments available for the small companies are also excellent in Europe, not forgetting the national instruments available in each member state. On the other side, on the right side, where the next other white color is, I call this the industrialization phase. Well, in times like this, when the economy is not growing, the banks don't really have too much places to invest in. They want to invest in industry, but there are not too many projects. So the situation in terms of finding financing for a good project, even in bioeconomy field, is good in Europe. But in between, we have this gray area. It's not my invention to call it the valley of death. It's frequently used in literature for describing this phase. But it's, I would claim, longer and more expensive for our project, and that is why we are a strange animal. And I'm emphasizing especially two things which makes it a bit more difficult or challenging. The first is that typically when you are manufacturing a product, at some point you need to make a pilot or a demo or a flagship. You can use any of these terms, but you have to build a small factory which is alike the big factory, but smaller. And those are quite expensive, and most of the project budget then goes to capital expenditure, CapEx. So it's quite different from, for instance, in the gaming industry, where you just buy a laptop, some software licenses, and then some cloud space, and you are in business, and you can make the demonstration. So this is, of course, an extreme example, but this is how it can go. So CapEx and CapEx and CapEx are really trademarks for what we are doing in our line of business. The second thing is that we have to create a value chain, a supply chain, and that is not so easy in our line of business. So, for instance, when you now try to engage the farmers in supplying the biomass for the bio-based industry, not only for the food industry, it is challenging. For instance, compared to the petrochemical industry, where you just you have the oil coming to the refineries, and you can just continue from there. So this is different, and that I think is important to understand, and that's why we cannot have one solution for all the sectors in Europe. We have to think about how they are different. Philip asked me to talk shortly about the history of the BBI, because I have the pleasure to be involved almost from the beginning, and I looked in my files and found some milestones. First of all, I was, while at the research organization, I was part of the Star Colibri project, which ended in 2011. They made a vision, they made a European research roadmap, and one of the recommendations was that the private-public partnership with the Commission would be a very beneficial investment model. So that was already one of the places where we were hinting that this would be needed in the future. Then in 2012, we started to work on a vision for this PPP. So we were already engaged in planning a PPP, and we called the vision Bio-based for Growth, again highlighting that we would need a PPP in the future. Then, from a legal perspective, December 2012 was very important when the Bio-based Industries Consortium was established here in Brussels. And during that autumn, we already were working also on a research agenda. And actually, I remember one of our meetings in Budapest, which was the day when the person who has been really the engine for the industry side, until that meeting in Budapest, where he then said that you now have to take responsibility. That's where I bought my PPP bag. At the airport, leaving from Budapest, being in charge of the financing group, I was together with a colleague who has already passed now, so much has happened since those days. We continued the work in 2013, and at least the private side was calling this PPP Bridge. So a dear child has many names. Today we call it the BBI Joint Undertaking. Well, in those days when we were planning this, we were of course hoping to have a difference. But to be very honest, I would never have dreamt of what I've seen today here at this forum. I would have never dreamt that so many companies and organizations would be engaged in this initiative. So this is really a proud moment for me to state some of the results of this initiative. Well, I think they have been said many times today, but the SME participation is over 40%. I don't think any H2020 initiative is even close to this level. In the beginning, I was saying, for instance, that we need the small companies when the big companies are doing the demo and flagship projects, and they have been very active in this role. But what I did not understand was that they would also take their own project and scale up inside the BBI joint undertaking, which is really fantastic. And those two things then end up in this great number. Well, I think today when you are, as a company, doing a demonstration and commercialization work, it's quite different from how it used to be 10, 15 years ago. I would claim again that it used to be basic research, applied research, and then industry research. But today, this is all happening at the same time. So we have many examples of demo projects where we are still looking for the really fundamental answers to some fundamental questions. So it's more happening in parallel compared to this linear way of doing research and development. So I'm not at all surprised that the role of the universities and RTOs is so high in BBI. And finally, the main objective of the companies in Budapest was really to get support for the flagship projects. We had a goal of 5 for the whole initiative. We are now at 9. So we are way beyond the goal, and you can see how many jobs we have created. And even more important, if you look at the numbers, how much the Commission has invested in these flagships and how much the companies have been investing in these flagships, you see that the leverage effect is huge. I don't know of any instruments in Europe that comes even close to this leverage effect. So this is really, really good news. Well, finally, I have 6 seconds left. I wanted to say what I do for a living today. So my company is called Metsä Spring. It's the venture capital arm of Metsä Group. This is, of course, not a new thing, but this is one way of catching interesting fish in this huge ocean of good ideas. We've made so far 2 investments. We are only 1.5 years old. One in a company, a joint venture company, which is aiming to demonstrate a process where you take pulp, paper-grade pulp, and convert it into staple fiber to make, for instance, a T-shirt. The second one is in a startup company who is combining wood chips and then a resin to make composite products like this wash basin here in the picture. Thank you.